All right, why don't we get started? It's 5 o'clock. Start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. Thanks for coming. Is there anybody that'd like to address the board at the open forum? Angie?
Am I on? Hello? Okay. Yep. My name is Angie Hansen. I reside at 2325 Larson Avenue in Albert Lea. I'm a community member, a parent, and a candidate for school board. I originally planned on coming here today to urge the board to change the proposed open forum procedures to allow the public to discuss any topic related to the district that doesn't include private data. Restricting the open forum to agenda items silences the community on many topics. It appears that you already came to the same conclusion because I see the new proposed open forum procedures no longer limit topics to agenda items. Thank you for thinking about this carefully and making that change. In the new proposed procedures, it states that the board will not hear complaints about individual school employees. Instead, those complaints are to be submitted in writing. I feel that this is completely appropriate for employees who have one or more administrators and the board holding them accountable. But when I got to thinking, I thought, what if I'm elected? Who is there to hold me accountable? After receiving the letter, what if the board chooses to do nothing? Or what if there is a complaint about the superintendent that the board chooses to ignore? The only one to hold the board accountable and ensure that the board is holding the superintendent accountable is the public. If the public is not allowed to speak about their concerns regarding the board and the superintendent, then what avenue do they have if their written concerns are ignored? I'm hoping that you will think about this issue carefully and continue to work toward transparency and accountability. Thank you.
Okay. Celebrating our successes. I see Mark made it. So Mark's going to make a presentation. Come on, come out, Mark. Better.
Dr. Shoddy, school board members, we had a great opportunity about 2 weeks ago. The Minnesota Supreme Court came to Albert Lea and held a case in our auditorium, and our 10th, 11th, and 12th graders were able to participate. And Ms. Stephanie Haight coordinated with the local bar association, local attorneys, to come into our classes for those students 2 days before to explain the whole process of what was happening during that day, how the case would be presented, information about the case. And so Stephanie did a lot of work. She was also on the committee that helped once we found out the Supreme Court was coming. And so Stephanie was able to take the case and get the educational materials ready for the other attorneys. She came first hour, which is always exciting to work with students, and worked with our kids in the auditorium. So we just want to say thank you for all your work on this project. Thank you.
Thank you, and if I could just address the board quickly, the true credit goes to Mark and his team at the high school. From the moment that we heard that the Supreme Court was interested in coming to Albert Lea, they embraced this unique opportunity from the beginning, and his team was fabulous to work with. I had a very small piece. I helped plan it, organize the attorneys, but I worked with a great group of people to bring it here, a great group of local attorneys that came in and presented all day that day. I only presented 2 periods. So thank you, but make sure that the thank yous and Mark and his team get recognized, because the true credit goes to them. I don't think we had any hiccups when the court was here, which shows the great planning that went into it. So thank you.
Thank you. And then before we approve today's agenda, I'll ask for additions. I have an addition, and we'll just do it to start 5.1. We need to add a special meeting for the purpose of canvassing the November 8th election results.
And that has to be done between November 11th and November 18th, but it can't be November 11th because that is Veterans Day. So that's something I want to add to the agenda is item 5.1. Any other additions before we approve? If not, I need a motion to approve today's agenda. So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Other discussion? All in favor, aye? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, 5.1. So we need a quorum, and sometimes it's hard to get a quorum, but we just, at a minimum, we need a quorum. The meeting lasts about 15 minutes for those of you that have done before. 2 years ago, we tried to do it the morning after, and I don't think we had the results, so that didn't work out well. So either the Thursday after the election or look into the next week, and we've done that historically at 7 a.m. So I don't know if anyone wants to throw out a date and we can all kind of look at calendars.
I don't think you can do that Thursday, Mark. That's the 10th. I think it has to be 11th.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, so then we'll have to look between the, thanks for clarifying that, between the 14th and the 18th.
I'll be gone that whole week. I'm going to be on vacation,
Okay.
so.
All right. Anybody else have a date they'd like to throw out?
14th, I'm gone all day.
Okay.
So how's the 15th look for everybody?
I can do the 15th. Dave, 7? Linda?
I'll make it work. I'm gonna be in New Grandma sometime. November 8th is the due date, so who knows?
Okay.
If it's on the 15th, the answer is no.
But-
I'll put it on.
But we'd have, if you couldn't make it, I can make it Bill, Jill, Dave, so we'd still be good. Yeah, okay. So that'll be then 7 a.m. Tuesday, November 15th. Okay. All right, thank you. The consent items, item 6. Need a motion to approve the consent items?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 7, reports, Dr. Funk.
Just a couple things tonight. The first thing I want to bring to your attention is a couple of you contacted me on this in the past week. Targeted Services are our extended school day program for students to receive additional assistance. We've been running this a number of years in the district, and here's our current status. We have programs running in all the buildings except Lakeview, and then we've got kindergarten, 4th and 5th grade that are having issues at Halverson. Currently, we're serving 285 students, and last year we served 330. We have 80 students signed up at Lakeview who are interested in targeted services. It's a staffing issue. I think we have teachers that are working hard, and they're working hard for their school day and their regular students, and they don't want to do the extended school day in some of our buildings here, as noted. So therefore, the district is looking at different options. We're looking at possibly bringing in retired teachers for the targeted portion of the day. We're checking on the legality of using substitute teachers to teach targeted services and working through licensure issues on that. And then the third option we're looking at is potentially transportation. So if we have a kindergarten program at Lakeview that has 20 kids in it, can we transport them to Sibley, where there is a program currently in place, and then we would have to transport the kids home after that. So I wanted to let the board know that, thanks for bringing that to my attention as well, Julie, that we are taking this issue seriously, and we're trying to figure out some options to work through it. So before I go on to the next slide, questions on that? First time I've seen this since I've been here. Sometimes we struggle, but this is the first time that we've seen it at this level.
So if transportation comes into the picture, how is that covered financially?
Transportation is covered through the targeted services revenue that's generated. So targeted services is in the reserve for the ALC. So what we would do is increase the budget we had already established for transportation in that fund.
Just a couple things. Quarter 1 is ending on Wednesday, and the kids are looking forward to this. My high school daughters are looking forward to the short week, getting finals done, and then having a little break here, which is due to MEA. And then the last thing I note is we have a choir and orchestra concert at 6 and at 8 p.m. this evening at First Lutheran Church. That is why our student school board members aren't with us here tonight.
Any questions for Mike about those? All right, school member reports, start with over on this side, Linda.
I'm on the Teacher of the Year committee, and we had our first meeting this last week.
Okay, thank you. Bill? No?
Just wanted to talk about a couple things. Didn't attend any outside meetings, but I wanted to report to the board that since our last meeting in September, I stopped counting at 30 members of the community who either stopped me out in the public or texted me, emailed me, commenting about the September meeting. They were very dismayed at what they saw. And it was kind of around two themes. One, which was upsetting to me as well, were that items were put on the agenda that board members did not have ahead of time. I don't know if anyone else is like me, but I need time to process things. And I think every item that comes before the board deserves adequate time to review, think about, process, and not having that opportunity, I don't do well in that situation. And after leaving the board meeting, it was very upsetting. Community members that contacted me said that meeting was terrible, and I would agree. That is how I felt also. And it's a horrible feeling when you leave a board meeting after feeling like you've been blindsided, and when you have time to reflect on that, you feel like you would have handled things differently and that you may have made votes that you regret. And I don't want any of us to feel like that. I have been feeling bad ever since that occurred. And I just know that I don't want to feel like that again. The second thing that board members, and this is not new, just since the September meeting, this has been over the last few months, but I had many comments about this again, and that is about the way our fellow colleague and board member, Jill Marine, has been treated. And I have tried to go through the proper channels and follow protocol to share my concerns about this. But Jill is a valued member of our team and deserves to be treated as we all do, with respect and with professionalism. And in my opinion, that is not happening. And we all are equals and deserve to be treated equally. And our community is upset watching what they feel like are personal conflicts being shown in the boardroom. And I just feel it's so important that conflicts are left at the door. We're here to do our job as board members, and that's educating students. And that has to start from a place of mutual respect. And so I just wanted to share the message from the community that they've shared with me, and it's that they expect and deserve a board they've elected be professional. And I know I want to be proud to be a board member, and I want our community to be proud of us. And I am hearing they're not feeling proud of us. So I wanted to report that back because it's really important. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe there is a school board candidate forum Thursday night at Riverland. And I just wanted to say thank you to all candidates. There are 10 this year, and I think that's a wonderful thing. It's always, there's always a cost to pay when running for any seat in any election. And I appreciate everyone who has put their name out there and has been willing to serve in this capacity, so thank you for that. I also would like to thank Julie for your comments tonight. They were very meaningful. Also, I do have some questions that remain unanswered that I have asked, I think earlier this summer, and maybe one or two since then that I haven't received answers for. Thank you.
The only thing I have to add is the MSHSL is currently voting to amend their constitution to allow a superintendent, basically from a large school and a small school, to be on the voting body. And so each school district was able to vote, and we have not heard the result of that yet. And I believe that would start next school year. So that's my understanding of it. So I'll let you know when we hear what the result of that was. Okay, 8.1, Jim, approval of open forum procedures.
Good afternoon. The policy committee met a couple of times, I think, since our last board meeting. And one of the things that we looked at was the verbiage for the open forum procedures. And the recommendation was that we make a change, and that would be that third bullet from the bottom, that struck the words "should they be accompanied by" in that bullet.
That was in addition to the fact that you decided to take out the restrictive language to agenda items.
Yes, that was, sorry, that was mentioned earlier.
So let's have a motion to approve that, then we'll have a second, then we can have discussion. So moved. Is there a second? Second. Discussion.
Thank you very much. I don't think my mic is on. Thank you very much to the policy committee for hearing feedback about the issue of their tying comments to an agenda item. That's much appreciated.
I also appreciate that piece is gone, that the open forum can be about any topic. And I'm assuming that this will be posted somewhere for the community to see, so I think some of my edits are more grammatical or just parallel theme. number 1, sign in and indicate the topic. So I'm wondering in number 2, can we just say identify yourself and the organization that you may be presenting? 3, as I've said before in the 3rd bullet point, it'd be my preference to change the limit to 3 minutes. I know it's a big push to get input into 2 minutes, and I would like to change the overall time to 15 minutes. I know there's been the argument made that somebody could stand up and talk about something irrelevant, and I mean, the most we have to listen would be 3 minutes or 15 minutes. I don't think that's a horrible thing to endure, because a lot of times that's never happened in my 10 years that I've been on the board, that I've been present. And I know that sometimes there are subjects where there are a lot of inputs that people would like and they can't get it down to 2 minutes. Bullet point 4, it's just editing again, seems that the is not needed. The school board will not hear complaints about, take out that the, individual school employees perhaps. And then it says administrations, presented in writing to school administrations. So that's just an edit there. I don't know if we want to say administration or administrators. And then my other input would be maybe to add a last bullet point or an additional bullet point at some place in there that says, if you would like questions answered, please submit them in writing to the board chair. Because I think people come with the anticipation, which people usually have, that if they ask a question, their question's going to be answered, but that doesn't happen in our open forum. So I would like to have just a bullet points to let them know that. If you would like your questions answered, please submit them in writing, something to that effect.
Other comments?
And I do appreciate getting it ahead of time, unlike last meeting. Thank you.
You know, I like the idea of 2 minutes and keeping it down to 10. Most of the time, that's going to work out just fine. I think the board at any time has the ability to have a discussion with regards to if they're going to open it up for a longer period of time. This is a guideline from what I see, or policy. So I don't see that as a restricting comments. You know, that would be my number 1. And just putting in there that you're going to have, was it that you're thinking about that you may want an answer to the question?
If you would like.
Okay.
If you would like an answer to your question.
Okay. Does that require then the board chair to provide that answer? Because there may be a situation, and I don't know what, I can't give you an example, but there may be a situation where you know, the board chair, you know, won't be able to provide that answer. It might be like a data privacy issue or something.
Yes, I understand that too. And in that case, at least if they can get some kind of answer, just saying that, we did receive your question, we are unable to answer because of this or this reason. But at least they get something back of substance rather than nothing at all. Could as well designate that or give the question to someone else to answer in their behalf.
Other comments or questions?
Yeah, a
Dave?
couple. I know one item that we did discuss at the policy committee meetings was to potentially go to a school board listening session ahead of our regularly scheduled meeting. Maybe have 2 school board members there 1 hour prior to. And if there's someone from the public that would like to visit about different things, as Jill mentioned, that we make note and we can make reports on that during our school board member report session. And the only other thing that I would say on the, is Jill, I thought it was a good comment about the question answer. I would, and I don't want it to sound limiting, but I would hate for there to be 30 questions that we go through, and again, just time to process for the board chair or whoever there would be to answer those questions would be my only thing, just to make sure we could get a good solid answer. Or maybe it's just a, hey, we'll get back to you, and I mean, don't mean to say we won't ever, but you know what I mean, just to get back to them. So that would be my only thought. I just, again, not trying to limit any numbers, just not want to extend it past, or maybe it's something they sign in ahead of time. Just some thoughts.
Could you just clarify that last statement? I'm not sure if you're, are you,
Which one do you mean?
about not trying to limit, but what are you?
Yeah, I just,
to say there.
it's kind of saying it, the same thing both ways, not trying to limit what anyone asks, but for the sake of maybe getting 15 questions and trying to get an answer, I don't know what that would be, what that would do for us. Maybe if there is that many pressing questions that ahead of the meeting, they would submit it to, maybe we have an inbox or something, or just something to try to keep the meeting moving along a little bit. Like I said, not trying to limit what's asked, but just in case we don't have, as Bill said, the information to answer a question, or, you know, in case we've got 15 questions, just to drag on a meeting. That's all.
And I guess my intention was not to have them answer that night. Maybe that's what you're thinking.
Yeah,
No, just
okay.
in the future, if they wanted to get their question answered at some point in the foreseeable future. Yeah, not that night.
Other thoughts? So, I mean, there's different suggestions. We'd have to send this back to the policy committee to sort through those.
I guess being on the policy committee, I think I like the way it's written. Again, I like the 2 minutes. I don't know that we really need to have that extra bullet on the bottom. If there are questions, they could submit them to the chair, and the chair could, you know, email the answers to the appropriate people if they need to. So I don't know. I don't really like the extra bullet myself.
Yeah, I'm trying to think through, I mean, in the open forum, which is what this is about, to my knowledge, I've gotten 3 questions from, not just me, but the board got 3 questions from the time I've been the chair. And in all 3 cases, I've contacted the person that asked the question. Now, I've gotten hundreds of questions on phone and email, and to my knowledge, I've answered every one. So is the point that whoever, the 5 people that do the open forum, if there's a question and there's what they're saying, then we'd get back to them? Is that what you're saying? I'm a little confused.
Yeah, I guess I'm confused too, because I've heard a lot more than 3 questions this year. Maybe that's the piece of it. Maybe we're busy listening and we're not really noting the questions that are being answered. But I've heard several presenters give three or more questions each. So I guess my answer to the question would be that if someone does have a question, we'll say, let's just pull out the calendar since it's an easy topic that's already been on the table recently, but you know, why something and why something about the calendar, then it would be something that they could submit in writing, and the chair can, probably that one could delegate it to someone to answer, and they could have their answers to their whys. But I guess I've heard a multitude of questions this year.
I can speak to the different procedures that we've observed throughout the state. I have never seen questions, a bullet on there, responding to questions. My statement to the board would be, echo what Mark just said. You are all your contact information as board members is out there in the community. They can call you, they can email you anytime. And the purpose for the open forum, in my opinion, is the time for the board to listen to the public. It's not a time to respond to questions. If somebody has a question, they can contact you from a variety of different reasons. I have not seen any model language that has anything about responding to questions.
And back to, I think, what Dave was saying, I mean, and I always think of worst case, I mean, theoretically, somebody could get up there and give the chair 60 questions. And that's abusive, unless, in the sense that they could have called ahead of time or gotten most of those. I'm not aware of someone who's asked me a question I haven't answered. And I might not have answered it publicly, but privately I have. And I may not have shared all that with the rest of you, but I'm not aware of someone. Now, I've had people ask me questions, and I've asked to meet with them, and they refused. It's a little different, but I'm not sure the open forum, in my opinion, is a place to set up questions for the board. Again, and maybe it's just me, but I get calls and emails all the time with questions, and I've responded to them. Or if I'm away, I've asked Julie to do that. I mean, I get that people have questions, but I'm trying to think of a question that would be asked at an open forum that couldn't have been asked before the open forum, so that the comments would be about the answer and not the question. I'd rather hear the comments about the answer, not what the question is. That's just my personal opinion. Yeah.
And I agree with that, and I'm not trying to set up 30 questions to be answered, and I know the chair, you know, has the ability to manage the meeting as the chair sees fit, and as with all the policy we've talked about, we say that we can customize them to our district and what's right for our district. I just, in an attitude of transparency and openness, rebuilding rapport, those are the foundations that I'm just bringing that point with. I am aware of persons who have brought questions and haven't received an answer. So I think it's kind of a natural assumption for some people when they do ask a question, to think that they will be getting an answer, and then if nothing comes, then there's the frustration and all of, you know, the negativity that goes with it. So it's just something that I was suggesting to perhaps put a little mediation or remedy to that problem that I see.
Okay. Other comments or questions? So there's a disagreement about some of the time, disagreement about that. So we can either vote on this or send it back to the committee for more processing to bring it back.
You have a motion and a second on the table.
Yeah, I realize that. Other comments, Julie?
My only comment is, I think that, like Jill has talked about the 2 minutes, but Bill gave the example of if there's something, and I know we've done it before, where lots of folks are here and we can extend that time. As long as we can do that, then I can live with the 2 and the 10. But I do think it's important, and not necessarily that it needs to be a bulleted item, but I would agree that I think we need some mechanism for how questions get answered. I don't know how exactly we do that, but I do think it's important that if people come and they have questions, they know, should they be emailing you with the questions as board chair, or Superintendent Funk with the questions? Because I also have heard feedback from folks that they have asked questions at the open forum and they haven't gotten answers in all cases. So I just think we somehow need a mechanism. I don't know that it needs to be a bullet added.
Okay.
Another response to that could be the chair could say, would you mind emailing me your questions, or email them to, either it cannot be addressed at all, or there could be a little verbal instruction for each one if you would like to have the question and if you haven't seen it yet, or we could have it in the procedure. Those, I think, would be the 3 options that I see.
So leave it as is, and discuss sometime else about questions, or have the chair ask to clarify a question, or acknowledge that there's a question but not necessarily make it a bullet point? Okay. Other discussions? All right, so call the question. All in favor, aye? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. Motion carries 5-1. 8.2, policy review. Just to note that 3 of these are the second reading. There's 3 readings total, so 3 are the second reading, and 8.2.4 is the first reading. Jim?
Yes, the policy committee, like I said, has met. There were no changes to this policy. Again, it was based upon MSBA model language, and so we're back at the second reading for this policy.
Okay, comments, questions?
I have a question. Well, I guess it's not a question, but maybe a clarification. I know that when we spoke about it last meeting, the points that were focused on were that 2B, members of the school board have binding authority only when acting as a school board legally in session. So it came out later in the meeting last month that the supposed problem there had to do with, this is my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, me asking questions when I'm not seated at this board seat. That's the reason for this policy in place here. I do understand that other districts have it. I just thought that was an interesting piece that didn't come out when I was questioning the need for it earlier, because as we know, each board member can ask whatever questions they want to ask, just as any community member can ask any questions that they want to ask as well. So that's, I guess, my comment, and I just question the need for this policy. Other than that, thank you.
Dave or Lynn, did you talk about that in specific, or? This is an MSBA policy? And Jill, I'll just tell you, my understanding was this was not about you, but because it's MSBA policy, this limits the liability of the district to actions of individual board members away from board duties. And let me think if I can give an example. So let's say that I'm attending a football game in Mankato, and I walk up to the van that took the cheerleaders and say, hey, I'm a school board member, I'm going to drive you all home. And they say, oh, you're a school board member, go ahead. I've not had authority from the school board, that's never been discussed, and we get an accident. The district, you know, the board, it separates me, I'd be reliable, not the board. I think that's my understanding of what B is.
Thank you, and that would make sense. And but it was presented to us in a form that there was some kind of problem going on. I asked repeatedly what kind of problem was going on, and it came out later that it happened to be question asking. So I guess in that context then, does this apply to question asking by any board member?
Jill, as an individual board member away from the table, do you have any authority over any employee in this district?
Are you asking me a question? Do I have any authority over any employee?
As an individual board member away from the table, do you have any authority over any employee in this district?
As an individual member of the community away from this board table, I have the same rights and authority and power that every community member has. So as I'm saying, in every capacity, any community member can ask a question. And it is actually culture in our city and county and state and country that elected officials generally do ask questions that they have themselves and on behalf of constituents. So some of my questions are on behalf of myself, and some of them are on behalf of my constituents. And those are the comments that I'm making. Questions aren't asked. I have never portrayed myself as being the spokesperson for the board in any way and at any time. And so I guess my question again is, does this policy preclude a board member from asking questions and expecting answers?
So, and again, let me try. I think it does not preclude that, but what it precludes is the ability or the directive from whoever you're asking the question to. They wouldn't give you an answer simply because you're a board member unless the rest of the board asked. They would then treat you more as a public member. And I think that's what B gets at again. And that's my understanding. And again, Bill and anybody that's done this before, if you guys talked about the policy.
Again, this is the second reading for District Policy 206, public participation in school board meetings and complaints against person at school board meetings and data privacy considerations. Again, there are no changes from the first reading from the policy committee on this one either, so.
So under Roman numeral 6, where it talks about procedures, so under A1, where it's talking about citizens who wish to address the school board on a particular subject should identify the subject. So does that need to now be changed to be in alignment with our open forum language?
I think they identify it when they sign in, don't they? Is that what the language?
The agenda item to which the comments pertain?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
Yep.
So that was one question.
yes.
And then under the section B on the next page that talks about complaints, I know that it is typically standard where there is a mechanism in writing of if the complaint is about the superintendent or a board member, who should the complaining party go to? So I don't know if it's board chair, but I know that in policies, I've seen lots of these policies, there is typically a section that talks about if there's a complaint of a board member or superintendent, who they should direct that complaint to.
And again, Lyndon, Dave, not to put you on the spot, but some of the, I know you reviewed other policies, did you see that in?
I don't
or?
remember seeing it in there, but I can see, it's a good point Julie's made in there. I don't know who that would be, as you think out loud. I mean, obviously, it would be with the superintendent, would be the board chair. But the board chair could be by the vice chair or something like that. I mean, do we need to put in a whole tree or chain of command? I'm not sure.
Is that something you could look at before the next reading?
And I think
just
you
so it's
could
clear.
even say board chair or designee, so that in the event that it were that individual. And then the only other thing I had was under Roman numeral 7, where it talks about penalties for violation of data privacy. I just had a question about the language used in each of A, B, and C, where it talks about a willful violation. I know that if there is still legal liability, whether it's willful or not willful. So I just had a question about should willful be there when there is still that potential liability, whether it's willful or not. So that was just my other question.
Julie, where specifically are you at? Sorry.
7A,
Yep.
no, that's a good catch.
So it's on the last 2 pages under Roman numeral 7, A, B, and C. The section that talks about penalties for violation of data
Gotcha.
privacy.
I can tell you that that was right from the MSBA policy. It does say willfully in there, so that's why we.
Okay, so it just may be a question to ask.
Yeah,
on
we'll go
that.
back and look at the statute.
Okay.
Because I think it may come straight from that statute,
Okay.
that's, yep.
I think what Julie's saying is, from the statute, you know, it's only if, you can only be found against the statute if you willfully do it, but it could be done unwillfully, and you'd still have attorney's fees, and even though the finding may be that it was unwillful. But that's what you're saying, is that there's still gonna be some procedure to get to that point.
Correct.
So it may be better to strike that word. So again, something to look at. Okay, good comments. Others about that one?
I have some, to Julie's point about the open forum and the agenda items. There is the provision for the open forum in 6C. The provision in 6A1 would provide the community an opportunity to speak to agenda items in addition to open forum. So if we do strike that, we would be then taking that away. For example, the second reading of this policy, if anybody wanted to speak to this, if we kept this wording, they could sign in for the agenda item and then maybe speak during this time or at the beginning of the meeting, particularly to this, and not take out from the 10 minutes of the open forum. So the open forum is provided for here already. And I think it's a question of, do we want to allow also citizens who wish to speak about agenda items? Because we're taking that away if we cut that one out.
So I think, say that, I think I'm with you, but.
Okay.
So are you on 6A1?
6A1 provides, the city council does this. They sign up ahead of time, like if they have a street assessment. And so then they have the choice, if they're not speaking on an agenda item, they can speak on anything they want in open forum. And then when their street assessment comes up, then they call the people who want to speak to that agenda item. So that's, I believe, what this is pertaining to, because C is the open forum itself. And it does say, I mean, there are limits here, like in A3, it says we can limit the discussion to reasonable. So we can still put limits on it if we feel the need to do that. But it does provide that extra opportunity for public input for agenda items. That's my understanding of how this is written.
Which I see exactly what you're saying, which we haven't practiced in the past.
Correct. Well, I like A. I like to have that additional opportunity if there was a certain agenda item that people could speak to it during that time. I like it. I don't, and maybe everyone else will not, but I would like to keep A.
Committee level, that?
No. So you're saying that during the, so they can speak to the agenda item during that portion, not during the open forum?
I think it would be up to the chair. We could either, you could either have the open forum and then agenda item discussion, or you could have the agenda item discussion right now before we discuss whatever the agenda is. I think there's flexibility there from my understanding, but that's just my guess.
And I see what Jill's saying. Right now, these are separate things. There's this agenda item discussion, and then C is the open forum.
And actually, D, there is a bullet point on our procedure, which we don't necessarily need either.
Right.
There will be no board action at the same meeting. It makes sense to have it in the policy rather than the procedure.
And, you know, some of you that have been in other districts, have you seen agenda item discussions or just the open forum?
I have never. Lori, have you seen agenda item discussions in your?
But this is an MSBA policy, correct?
Yeah, yes. So it's.
I just don't think they do it in this manner. I think one of you suggested maybe they could incorporate this into the open forum component of it.
So
I would suggest that the policy committee look at this again. Let's bring it back and we can tweak it and bring it back.
okay.
I do have a couple other questions too. I actually asked these questions last month and I haven't received the answer yet. One question was, how does this policy differ from the MSBA policy? If I can have that answer before the next hearing. Also, I had asked about the, I think it's in 3B.
In which one, Jill?
3B, I think, about complaints and when that becomes when that becomes, okay, a complaint against an employee and when that becomes public information. We were going to find out when. Is it only after the issue is resolved, or is it, the wording is a little vague there, so we were going to check on that.
And Jill, I remember that, but just so we get the right answer, where, I know you're in B, but
3B has to do with, I think it's the fourth line down, status of any complaints or charges against the employee regardless of whether the complaint or charge resulted in disciplinary action, final disciplinary action. They're listed separately there, so I don't quite know if it's only after final disposition is given or if it's during the complaint process. That was my question. When does it become public data and what is public data? Okay. And then the other question I had that wasn't answered has to do with school board members' rights to privacy, which would have to do with Section 4. Since school board members are district employees, do they have the same rights to privacy for private hearings and things like that? That was my other question that someone was going to get back to me on. And then I had asked about complaints, written complaints to the school board, which I think was actually in 6B4. Because I asked if this meant that they should notify the school board in writing at a meeting, and that was going to be looked into since this is a meeting policy. So when and to whom should they be given, I guess was my question.
If they have a complaint at a meeting and it involves an employee of the district, they can hand it to myself or the board chair, since it's supposed to be written.
Okay, thank you. So then I'll need the answers to those other 3 questions, please.
so just I want to make sure we know the questions and who's going to answer them.
Okay,
So that,
thank you.
do them again, please.
First question is, how does this particular District 241 policy differ from the MSBA policy?
And so, Dave and Linda, is this verbatim, or we've had some changes, or do you remember?
We'd have to go back to the edited one, which I don't have with me.
But you could forward, you could just forward the MSBA one off the website to all of us, maybe? Then we can look? Okay.
Okay, and then the second one has to do with Section 3B about complaints, complaints against employees and when they become public information and what is public information.
Okay.
And then lastly, Section 4, rights to privacy, and how that applies to actual school board members.
So Jim, are those things you could ask Kevin?
Ashley, did you get all those down? So we'll go and vet them out and figure out who's the point of contact for answering each of those.
And maybe just send all of us the answers?
Sure.
That'd be great. Okay. Other questions? And that too was a second reading. If not, we'll move on to 8.2.3, which is videotaping. of school board meetings.
Proposed district policy 215, videotaping of school board meetings. This is the second reading. Again, we made no changes from the first reading, and so it's as written.
Comment. I made a comment at the last month's meeting for Section 3E about the posting that will be posted to let people know who are sitting here that they will be videoed, and whether or not this covered people if the board moved out of the building, out of the building or to a different room. And I know you mentioned, Mr. Chair, maybe adding verbiage about that videotaping will be consistent in this room. So if there haven't been any edits, I'm wondering, will there be any edits to that effect?
But I don't know how you're going to put that on a sign. I mean, I saw the signs. I guess just my practical mindset, why don't we just have a sign that says this room is under constant video and audio surveillance? I mean, I get this, all this legal stuff, but I think if somebody comes in the room. No, that's fine.
Because this does limit it to the public portions of board meetings will be videotaped, and if they know that there may be videotaping in this room at any time, it
Anytime.
does.
And again, for other, I don't know, there might be other groups that use the room and inadvertently turn the thing on. There's all kinds of things that can happen. So if there's just signs that say, this room is under constant video and audio surveillance, I think most people understand what that means. I understand you have to have the legal and the policy, but that'd be my suggestion. Other comments?
Is that what they say? A little bit more. Okay. We'll take a look at the signs that we had made and see if, okay. All right. This one, we spent considerable time on, and so I appreciate Linda and Mark coming. We spent a lot of time with Lori, and Steve Anderson joined us on the facilities piece, and Lori did a good job of spearheading this policy. So this is, if you have anything to add, the other three of you, please jump in. The policy itself, there was not much change to it. There wasn't significant change to the policy. We did do some revisions with the procedures, which is a different agenda item. Lori, could you speak to the addition on the certificate of insurance? I think that was a significant addition to the policy, or at least a substantial change.
Basically just lining out which situation where a cert of insurance will be requested from the district to protect the district from liability.
So it's Roman numeral 6. It's the last sentence in the first paragraph. A certificate of insurance or special events policy may be required by the school district to ensure payment for these damages and any liability for the injuries.
Okay. I have a question about the next sentence, since we're on that. The use of school facilities must be in the public interest. And I know what public interest is, but I'm not sure why that sentence is there, and it sounds like something that could be argued either way for whatever reason. And let me just give you that. Let's say the Boy Scouts want to use the gym downstairs for a meeting. Is that in the public interest? Is that different than a church that wants to use? I mean, that just seems like a sentence that's so vague and could be argued depending on who the group is and what somebody thinks of the group. I'm not sure what that's discussion, or does anybody else have any ideas about what that protects the district from, or what its purpose is?
I can tell you how it ended up there. It was actually in the procedures, so you can imagine something that vague in the procedures. So when we read through that, it was the consensus of the group that sounded much more like verbiage that would be in policy and not in a prescriptive procedure. And we had some discussion, I think, about public interest. Yep, it doesn't lay out here how you would define what that is. I don't know if the board as a group would know where that line is, where it's in the public interest or it's not. So that's where the origination of the language, at least.
Why do you need that line at all is my question. And I have stayed so far away from this. This is the first time I've looked at the facilities piece at all. My question would be, you can scratch that line, and you can say the school district reserves the right to deny the use of school facilities. Activities detrimental to the purpose of schools will not be allowed.
Yep.
I guess my personal look at public interest would be that it would be providing some kind of public benefit. So I understand the vagueness of it. So for a public benefit, it would be, we are one of the largest organizations in the, community, and so people could use a larger facility for something if it was for public benefit, if it would feed into the culture, those kind of things. But I agree that it could be possibly removed if we wanted it to. Another piece of that is that if it kind of leaves, kind of follows with our fee schedule, because there are some groups that have no fees, and then some groups do have fees. And so there would be some benefit then to the district as well as the public in making the facilities open to the public and serve the public interest both in the public culture and in the school district itself.
No, and I agree. And I was also thinking back, at some point in the Southwest Little Theater, we had a church in town that didn't have a home, and they used that on Sundays, which I think was great. But I can also see a large group of people that will come and say that's not in the public interest, that's just about that church group, and we don't believe in that religion. And so it's a line in a policy that just seems so vague and possibly restrictive. It worries me from a policy standpoint. So I'd like to strike it and set up procedures that help determine who uses the facilities. But again, other thoughts would be welcome.
I agree.
Dave? Okay. Again, just a first reading. Or is this first? This first, yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, were you specifically talking to the first sentence?
The first sentence, yes, just the first sentence. All right, so we'll bring that back in November for number 2. Number 2 reading, and then 8.3, the use of the facilities procedures. Jim.
All right, and then this was the procedure sheet. So again, there wasn't significant change in the policy, but we reformatted this. I think this is where most of our discussion was in relation to the procedures, groups, rental times, kind of looked at every word as we went through here. So first page talks about the fee schedule, or at least my page 1, right? There's 2 parts here, I guess. And then the actual procedural parts. Not sure how much time you've had to go through and review this. And then it talks about the 4 groups, and we had some discussion on there too. So I would leave it open to anyone that was on the policy committee that if you have significant comments related to this. I facilitated it, but they had some really good discussion. We had some great discussion on some of these points and where they should be. So this would be our procedure.
And I'll start off. One question I had, maybe for the committee after I reviewed this. It's not clear to me that if I'm a teacher and I want to access my building after hours, whether this covers that or doesn't cover that, it's just not clear to me.
We had that conversation, and this does not limit a teacher from accessing the building after hours.
And using the facilities.
Like, what do you mean using it? Like if they come into their classroom and they're grading
Right.
papers or doing something like that.
But if they had to go to the main office to laminate and collate and staple. And
I don't
then-
think they have
can
keys to
they-
get into all the offices. I mean, I don't think that teachers can just, can
What
they?
if they
I
wanted to
don't
go
know.
play basketball in the gym?
Yeah, we did discuss that a little bit, and I think we talked more about the limiting factors, not necessarily if they're gonna set up an event on their own, that they should be going through the same procedures that anyone else would, as far as registering the event and things like that. We also recognize the fact that sometimes when, just use a teacher as an example, maybe their children come in while they're working after hours, and that they are, I think somewhere near it stated as a school employee, he is responsible for the management of that activity. So no, we didn't get real specific on that. As Mark said, like come in, use the basketball court, or Mike did. So, but we pretty much left it open more to their areas that they were in, fully understanding that sometimes it probably does happen in that direction, but not maybe micromanaging to that point.
Okay. Julie?
Related to that issue, I know when we first talked about this at a prior board meeting, I think it would be very helpful, though, to call out where the groups are listed on. It's page 106 of 109 in our packet. So where Group 1, Group 2, Group 3, and Group 4, where do district employees fit? And I think it's really important that we call that out and say district employees, whether they fall, to me, it seems like Group 1 is, for educational purposes, they're getting first priority, which makes sense. So does it make sense to add them as Group 2 as a district employee? But I just think the more, if we don't call that out and it comes into question in the future, I feel like it's too subjective of where that falls. And that we need to call out where district employees fit in these procedures as a, under what group.
For which activities? Do you mean going into the classroom and stapling papers together and doing their own work, or do you mean like playing basketball in the gym?
Playing basketball, yeah. Like not in the course of their work to grade papers or put packets together or, put a PowerPoint together. It's to do the things like the playing basketball or, things like that.
And
So-
I would,
go
sorry.
ahead.
I would agree with that because there are a few pieces here I think that are missing. Even residents, where would an individual resident fall? Because Group 1 is the educational piece. Group 2 are organizations. Group 3 are organizations. Group 4 mentions non-residents. But where would a resident fall in here as well? And at what point is an employee, and at what point is an employee a resident? Where does that fall in? Because the facilities do belong to the community and not just to the district itself. So I think that's actually a part of the public interest. Are we really serving public interest in the way that we are accessing the facilities that the public pays for?
Okay, so for employees, and I think back to Julie's, again, I think for the committee, but give some direction, do we think they should be Group 1?
Can you repeat that, please?
So for the teaching staff, so if a teacher wanted to look this up and see where they fit, would they be Group 1 or Group 2?
I know we'd had a lot of conversation about not limiting it to the community use because, community members are taxpayers, so we want to make sure that everyone is able to use the facilities. So I think community could be in the first Group 1. And community, to me, includes teachers.
Just that goes to the point I want to make about this, okay? As a teacher or an employee of this district, okay, you could be a member of the Family Y, you could be part of Riverland, you could be part of a political party, and so we need to identify what we're talking about here, because we're talking about groups, We're not talking about individuals. So perhaps you want to create another category for individual employees of the district, not operating in a capacity as a group member. Because, well, hey, I belong to this church, and I'm a member of this school district, so therefore, I'm going to let us use the church facility or the small auditorium. So I think we need to go back and identify the role of the individual employee related to the groups.
I think we also need to identify and be very careful with the individual employee in a work-related capacity and the individual employee with recreation, personal, yes.
And I would say that our discussion was around groups and plugging groups in. And we even discussed if a individual resident was to say, hey, I want to use the auditorium, usually it's in relation to a group that they are a member of. Maybe that's back to that public interest piece as opposed to an individual saying, I want to use the auditorium to, I don't know, be in there by myself. I don't.
I think there have been individuals, though, that have requested a room for a private party. So those kind of things, I think we need to be very careful in, that we're being clear and balanced in our approach.
Well, I've seen individuals for post-graduation parties, okay? Post-prom parties, including myself, all right, that are benefiting the students of this district. So all of those need to be taken into account.
I just didn't, will we get in, sorry, Mike. I just want to make sure we didn't get into contractual items when it came in with the teachers' contracts, by grouping them into certain groups, employees into certain groups, the paras, the janitors, the office personnel, those kind of things that we were talking about that as kind of like group 4 sits down here as fourth priority. In a sense, we see non-residents and then the residents in the first 3 groups, just trying to split them up, basically coming back to who might need to provide insurance because maybe they're financially gaining from using the facilities versus someone, the Boy Scouts as an example, they're going to use it every Monday night or every third Monday night of every month that are going to meet there and maybe go into the gym and have an activity or do the Pinewood Derby. Something like that was kind of our discussion more than, and I can see what you mean by the individuals and how they fall, because we talked about, using the facilities and getting together, my family at a family reunion and using the batting cage. It's a lot more liability there than sitting in the room and having lunch. So just different things we talked about.
As far as, going a different direction too, the one facility that's not on here is our parking lots. The parking lot not on? That better? Thank you. The one thing that's not on this, as far as from a facility standpoint, is our parking lot. Is specifically Hammer Field. That gets beat up quite a bit by the use of, the rendezvous, the fair, anytime that's being used as a shuttle area, it's something that should be considered. And on top of it, talking about potential liability with car accidents, somebody getting run over, I've always been concerned about that. So that should be in this policy. If you're going to use our parking lot, we got to be covered.
Okay.
I keep losing my internet connection here, but are parking lots addressed in the fee? I thought I saw parking lots mentioned someplace. Now I need to look it up again, but didn't see it there. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't see it.
I do have one other general question. In group 2, it talks about nonprofit youth groups. So do church youth groups fall in that category, or do they fall in one of the other religious organization categories?
I think if it's a youth group, and again, I wasn't part of this discussion, but maybe it's youth-led whereas if it's a church, it's adult-led. Thoughts from the group?
It's a good question. I don't think we didn't discuss that.
There would be some groups that would want to know that, and they could kind of fall into different groups here, so that would be a question I would like to have answered.
Okay. Very good. Any other comments? You know, it's an action item. I don't think we're there to even have a motion on it, but.
I noticed, under, let me find where it was now. On it's the page 3 of the actual procedures, it's page 103 in our packet. And I noticed it in another place, but I forgot to write this down. It makes reference to athletic director a couple of spots, and I wondered, should that be changed to activities director? And I forget where the other place that I read that. I know it was in a couple of places.
Hey, Bill, number 11 there, I think is that what you're talking about? It doesn't say parking lots.
Parking lots are mentioned just a little bit on 2C. Parking supervision is mentioned.
As long as we're covered. If you feel that adequately covers us. Sorry, if you feel that adequately covers us, then I don't have a problem, so I missed that.
I don't think it does, but I just thought I had seen parking someplace.
Well, we can easily put in parentheses, including parking lots on those things for Hammerfield and Southwest. We're going back to make some revisions. We can sure look at that.
Other comments or questions? So, policy committee, you guys got some work to do. And then we do appreciate, I know you've met many times, and we do appreciate that, because it's important work. Okay, anything else? I think we're adjourned. Thank you.